Three sinister true stories where haunted dreams expose terrifying secrets of the cursed reality. In Maplewood, the white picket fences gleamed, and the sun-drenched lawns gleamed as if they held more than just grass. They held secrets. Sarah, a single mother, thought the picturesque suburb was her way out, a clean slate for her and her son, Jake. But beneath the surface, a shadow lurked. The first signs came in the dead of night, like echoes from another world. Nightmares invaded her sleep, so vivid it felt as if the smiling faces of her neighbors morphed into something grotesque. They watched her, their eyes gleaming with malevolence, hiding sinister truths behind their curated lawns. One evening, Sarah returned home exhausted from her shift at the local grocery store. The fading daylight cast eerie shadows, and she noticed the front porch light flickering erratically. It stopped abruptly as if mocking her fear. Shivering, she shook it off. "It's just a bulb," she whispered to herself. But just as she turned away, she heard a soft whispering that crawled along her skin like icy fingers. "Help!" It scraped behind her ears, sending shivers down her spine. Who was watching her? Then there was Emma, her once loyal friend. What happened to the laughter they shared? Now, Emma glanced over at Sarah's house as if searching for something or someone. The corners of her smile faded, replaced by a worry Sarah couldn't decipher. The air between them thickened with unspoken words. The paranoia crept in, coiling like smoke in her lungs, suffocating her trust. Days turned into restless nights filled with grotesque visions. One particular night, Sarah awoke gasping, sweat pooling at the small of her back. In her dream, the handyman, a friendly neighbor with a warm smile, was above a shallow grave. Bloodied hands, the knot in her stomach tightened as the news of another neighbor's disappearance broke days later. Glancing at her phone, she saw the police dismiss her fears, telling her it was just a case of overactive imagination. Therapy, they suggested. But Sarah felt the lies like poison seeping through Maplewood's facade. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tonight, she decided enough was enough. Determined to keep Jake safe, she confronted each neighbor, unleashing her fears into the night, desperate for answers. As they gathered around, the air thickened with tension, palpable and electric. Their smiles grew tight, twisting into masks of menace. "What are you hiding?" she demanded. But before the first response could form, a looming shadow at the edge of the street swallowed her breath. The night stilled, and in that chilling stillness, a realization clawed at her. The nightmares were just the beginning. The secrets of Maplewood ran far deeper than manicured lawns and perfect smiles. Would she uncover the truth before she became another lost soul, consumed by the lurking darkness? The wind howled through the trees, like the anguished cries of the restless. Sarah shivered as she backed away from the circle of neighbors, feeling exposed under their scrutinizing stares. She clutched her phone like a lifeline, the illuminated screen casting eerie shadows across their faces. The flicker of her porch light echoed in her heart, amplifying the dread building inside her. "Maybe we should all just settle down," one neighbor suggested. His voice was too smooth, too calm. "Sometimes it's better not to dig too deep." Their laughter and nervous, sharp sound pierced the night. It felt wrong, jarring against her mounting anxiety. Each chuckle seemed to blend into the shadows, winding around her and squeezing tight. She glanced at Jake, who stood a few paces behind, his small figure dwarfed by the towering adults. His wide eyes reflected the fear that gripped her. "Shut up." Sarah's voice erupted unexpectedly, raw with panic. "I know something's wrong. Just tell me what you're hiding." The laughter died, replaced with uncomfortable silence. She examined their faces, desperate for a sign of guilt, a flicker of fear, something that would confirm her suspicions. Instead, they just exchanged glances, as if sharing a secret she would never be privy to. Out of nowhere, the air turned thick, a pressure building like the moment before a storm. "Sarah, please. It's best to keep your head down," hissed Emma, stepping forward. There was concern in her voice. but it was laced with something darker. "You have Jake to think about." And then the shadows shifted again. A figure emerged from the darkness behind the group, more than just a silhouette. The handyman. He stepped forward, a chilling smile plastered across his face, the glint in his eyes reminding her of the bloody dream, the dream that felt too real to dismiss. "Sarah, no need for alarm. We were just talking about how the neighborhood can get a little overwhelming." Overwhelming. She could barely keep her voice steady. "Is that what you call it? Another neighbor gone missing, and you think I should just sit in my house and pretend everything is fine?" "Sometimes ignorance is bliss," he replied smoothly, his words slithering into her ears. "Don't you think?" Heart pounding, an old instinct kicked in. Fight or flight. She glanced back at Jake, who was slowly inching behind her. Pure survival kicked in. "We're leaving," she declared, turning sharply. But the handyman raised a hand, the smile disappearing as his eyes darkened. "You're going to regret this, Sarah." The moment stretched, dread like a vice around her chest. She felt Jake pulling on her shirt. "Mom, let us go?" he begged, his voice barely above a whisper, panic lining his small face. Just then, the flickering porch light stabilized, casting a harsh glow over the gathering. Each neighbor's expression twisted, mouths forming almost silent words she couldn't hear. Fear gripped her like a vice, making it hard to breathe. She dragged Jake toward their house, the heaviness of the air seeming to follow them like a predator as they hurried inside. Sarah's thoughts spiraled. What if she was wrong? What if it was all in her head? But deep down, she knew that something was terribly off. Sinking into the shadows, the thought burrowed into her mind. "I can't trust anyone here." The door slammed shut behind them, the sound reverberating loudly in the stillness of the house. Sarah leaned against it, trembling. She locked the door and turned to Jake, who looked up at her, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Mom, are we okay?" "Yeah, buddy, we're okay." She forced a smile, but it felt hollow. "But we need to stay alert." Outside, whispers danced along the walls, taunting her. She felt a presence lingering just beyond their windows, watching. Was it her imagination, or were the neighbors really out there? Then a soft knock echoed through the house, gentle but insistent. What could they want? Jake whispered, eyes glued to the door. "Stay back," Sarah hissed, her heart racing. She crept toward the window, peeking through the blinds. Her breath caught. The backyard was empty, but the shadows seemed to shift and swirl, coalescing into figures. Just beyond the fence, the neighbors stood in a line, their countless eyes glistening in the darkness, waiting. Waiting for what? Sarah felt an ice-cold finger trace down her spine. "What do you want?" She dared to shout, her voice breaking the quiet, but the figures remained silent, their sinister smiles creeping wider, filling her with a terror that settled into her bones. The nightmare was just beginning, and as the shadows outside began to creep closer, she realized the truth. They weren't just hiding something, they were hunting for something. What would that mean for her and Jake? Would they become the next to vanish into Maplewood's secrets? The knock came again, sharper this time. Sarah's heartbeat echoed in her ears, drowning out the world around her. She pressed her back against the door, feeling the worn wood against her trembling body. The whispers outside grew louder, leaching into the air as if the very walls of her home became a magnet for their dark intentions. Mom, Jake's voice wavered, breaking through her thoughts. He clutched her pant leg, eyes wide and terrified. The innocence of his fear passed through her as a jarring reminder of what hung in the balance. "Sure, it's okay." She tried to infuse her voice with calm, but each word felt hollow. Could she protect him from whatever evil lurked outside? Maybe they just want to talk? Jake suggested, glancing nervously at the door. "Talk." The word tasted bitter on her tongue. "No, it's more than that." The noise transformed into a soft chorus, a hum of voices weaving through the crevices of the house. They beckoned her, coaxing her to join them in that sinister gathering. It was seductive, pushing against her resolve. But she forced herself to remain grounded, wrapping her fingers tightly around the kitchen counter to quell the rising tide of panic. "Mom." Jake's voice broke through again, sharper now. They're coming closer." Instinct kicked in, igniting a flame of defiance within her. She shot a glance at the door, then back to her son. "We need to hide, right now?" Sarah grabbed Jake's hand, leading him through the darkened living room towards the basement door. Whispering memories clawed at her stories she'd heard as a child. The basement was a labyrinth of shadows and echoes, its presence both comforting and suffocating. Just as she reached for the doorknob, another knock thundered against the door of the house, shaking the frame. She froze. Fear coiled tight in her chest. "Let us in, Sarah." A familiar voice called, a voice she thought she could trust. "Emma, we just want to help." But the trust felt tainted now, marred by the crooked smiles and sinister glances exchanged moments earlier. Her mind raced, fighting against the echoing clamor of false reassurances. "Mom, we can't stay here," Jake whimpered, pulling on her arm. "They're not normal." "I know it." "Do you mean the neighbors?" She whispered harshly, a mixture of disbelief and realization washing over her. "You saw them too?" "I saw the way they looked at us. They're not like people." His words seemed to chill the air around them. She swallowed hard, the truth of his statement hanging heavily in the air. Could he be right? She felt her mind racing. Images of the neighbors twisted into grotesque caricatures, their intentions eclipsed by shadows that danced in her memory. Then, as if amplifying her worst fears, the power flickered and died. The oppressive silence that followed swallowed them whole. The world outside dimmed to an ominous black, nothing but darkness pressing against the windows. "Mom." Jake's voice wavered, breaking her from the encroaching dread. She clenched her teeth, fighting back terror. "Okay, we go to the basement. Now." She forced herself to turn the knob and opened the door with a creak that echoed like a death knell through the house. Unable to see, she stumbled forward, gripping Jake's hand tightly. As she descended into the basement, the air thickened. A primal instinct told her she was not alone. Shadows lurked at the edges, slithering through the darkness like phantom fingers grasping to pull her back. "Mom, there's something down here." Jake's voice was a strangled whisper. "Stay close." But even as she said it, fear slithered into her heart. What could be hiding down here? And what waited for them upstairs? Every second felt heavy, as if time itself conspired against them, dragging them closer to an unseen horror. Footsteps echoed from above, menacing and steady. They were here, and they would not stop until they found what they were after. As Sarah crouched low, shielding Jake with her body, she wondered if they were really safe, or just delaying the inevitable. But above them, the voices grew louder, twisting into a chilling cacophony. "We know you're down there, Sarah. We just want to help." What were they hiding? And how much more would she have to lose before she uncovered the truth? The creeping dread deepened, the shadows around them thickening like a pact made in darkness. What if the truth about her neighbors was far worse than she had imagined? What if these twisted secrets were the only things that could save her? The darkness enveloped Sarah and Jake like a heavy, wet blanket. She could barely see her hand in front of her face. Her heart raced fiercely. Each thud seemed to drum a warning against the silence. The footsteps above paused momentarily, and for a brief second, anxiety and hope coiled within her. What do we do now? Jake's voice crackled, lost amidst the shadows. "We wait," Sarah whispered, despite every instinct telling her to flee. "We stay quiet." But the oppressive darkness felt alive, swirling around them, teasing her with unanswered questions. Footsteps, loud and deliberate, began again, dragging against the wooden floor overhead. Sarah sensed an urgency in the heavier shuffles, a desperate search. Mom, Jake's breath shuddered against her shoulder. "They can hear us. I can feel them. They want to find us." "They want tea," she said, not truly convinced. Every second stretched thin, heavy with the weight of dread. A part of her knew they were being hunted, but she still fought against the primal urge to scream, to run, to do anything but wait. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through the basement, seeming to freeze them in place. The air shifted, charged with an energy that prickled against Sarah's skin. An unfamiliar whisper curled around them, almost too faint to decipher, but clear enough to chill her to the core. "I can smell you," the voice hissed, echoing through the darkness, slithering between the shadows like a snake among tall grass. "Stay close," she urged Jake, gripping his hand tighter, her nails digging into his flesh. The shadows at the edges of the basement stirred. Distorted shapes twisted and coiled where the light didn't reach, inching away from the walls, growing larger and more distinct. They seemed to pulse with life, mirroring her fears yet again. "Mom, look." Jake leaned closer to her, his eyes wide and glimmering with unshed tears. What are they? Don't look. Keep your eyes on me, she insisted. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet fear paralyzed her. They couldn't make it back upstairs, not in that moment, not amidst the palpable dread that soaked the air above them. But even as her fought to hold Jake's attention, the voices above swelled, piercing through her thoughts. We understand you, Sarah. We want to help you, just need to let us in. Help? She scoffed through clenched teeth, her heart tightening painfully. That's not help. It's a trap. And just then, the whispers morphed again, spilling out secrets from the neighboring homes. Her neighbors had been gathering. They had been watching, plotting. What had she done to invite this turmoil, this haunting? Their collective power was built on lies that twisted into a grotesque reality, mocking her ignorance. Suddenly, a loud crash rattled the house above, drawing her attention. The footsteps ceased, replaced by frantic shrieks, sudden chaos that echoed through the walls. What is happening? Jake shouted, clinging to her. I don't know. Panic fluttered through her veins like fire. We have to move. Come on. With their last shred of courage, Sarah pulled Jake forward. The stairs were steep, and even in darkness, she could feel an overwhelming instinct directing them deeper, urging her toward a hidden corner she had never explored. It was wrong, so wrong. But they had no choice, only the compulsion to survive. As they navigated murky corners, Sarah felt the weight of the walls closing in around them, shadows twisting like living sentinels, watching, waiting. Each step echoed louder than the last, the house complaining under the strain of their movement. What if they find us? Jake whispered, dread hanging between them. They won tea. She wished she could believe it. But uncertainty lurked like a predator, lying in wait. Just then, a figure emerged, illuminated faintly from behind crates stacked against the wall, a pair of haunting eyes fixating on them. In that moment, all she could feel was the overwhelming dread that washed over her. The stranger spoke softly, their voice threaded with urgency. You need to listen to us. Sarah froze, her heartbeat thrumming in her ears. Who was this? What did they know? Were they friend or foe? The air thickened around them, suffocating her resolve. Would they find salvation or doom in this dark enclave? When Sarah reached for answers, would she discover there were secrets even darker waiting to be unearthed? And in that moment, she knew they were far from safe. The true horror lingered just beyond their grasp. The figure stepped closer, their form becoming clearer in the dim light. A woman, gaunt and pallid, with eyes that gleamed, almost feverishly. The soft glow from a single light bulb caught the sharp angles of her face, casting a peculiar shadow that danced on the wall behind her. Please, she urged, voice trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. You don't have much time. They are coming. Jake squeezed Sarah's hand tighter, and she could feel his pulse racing. Her mind spun with confusion and fear. Who are you? What do you want? Names don't matter, the woman said urgently, glancing over her shoulder, as if the darkness itself might leap out and consume her. What matters is your next move. Follow me if you want to survive. Survive what? Sarah shot back, her voice sharper than she intended. What are you talking about? The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she shifted, letting her gaze slide toward the confined corners of the basement. Shadows flickered behind her, and for a moment, Sarah thought she could see more than just infinite darkness. Vague forms moving fluidly, creatures born from nightmares. Listen, the stranger's tone suddenly turned urgent. The whispers will grow. They will come, and they will take you. They've taken others. You must trust me. No, Sarah protested, her heart slamming against her ribcage, thickening the air around her. Trust a stranger? They had already been deceived once tonight. But Jake was already looking at the woman with wide, frightened eyes. Mom, maybe we should follow her. Sarah could feel her resolve cracking, pressed down by the weight of fear and doubt. Would they really be safer with this woman? The basement felt more sinister by the second, the shadows pulsating with life as if hungry for their despair. Make a choice, the woman hissed, urgency breaking through her paralytic calm. They are coming. I can help you escape. But if you stay here, you'll thud. The floor above them creaked ominously, followed by another crash this time. It sounded like furniture being overturned. They've found the others, the woman whispered, eyes growing wide with terror. Mom, Jake yelped, panic erupting in his voice. What if we stay here? What if we go with her? Sarah's mind raced. The walls felt as though they were inching closer. Goosebumps prickled along her skin. They had never been this deep in the house before. It felt like a maze, a labyrinth where every twist and turn could lead to doom. Fine, she finally blurted. We'll trust you. Just show us a way out. The woman nodded, a flicker of relief washing over her strained features. This way, hurry. Then she turned, moving deeper into the shadows, beckoning for them to follow. As they hurried after her, the shadows seemed to cling closer, wrapping around them like hungry, grasping hands. The air grew thicker, suffocating as whispers grew louder, curling around Sarah's thoughts. I can smell you, the disembodied voice crooned again, echoing in a maddening harmony with the shadows. What do we do? Jake's voice trembled, barely audible against the oppressive din. Just keep going, Sarah urged, but a sickening realization twisted in her gut. They were in a race against time. As they ventured deeper into the unlit recesses of the basement, the shadows surged and shifted. Figures emerged and vanished before her eyes, flickering to life only to retreat into darkness. Sarah tightened her grip on Jake. And then, just as a glimmer of hope flickered in her chest, she heard a low growl emanating from the churning abyss behind them, a promise of inevitability that stole her breath. Run! The woman shouted, her voice urgent, cutting through the chaos as things began to pour from the shadows, advancing toward them. Fear clawed at Sarah's throat as they raced into the unknown, not knowing what awaited them, but knowing with every hurried step that they had unwittingly crossed a line into something beyond comprehension. And in the fading echo of their desperate flight, a thought pierced through the chaos. How many more had been led astray, and how many were bound to this cursed existence? Ahead of them, darkness reigned supreme, but hope had become an elusive specter, leading them deeper into a horror they might not survive. Would they find escape, or was the basement merely a gateway to something far worse? They stumbled through the shadows, hearts racing, breaths heavy with fear. The woman led the way, moving with a determination that felt both comforting and sinister. Jake's hands slipped into Sarah's, their fingers interlocking, a frail barrier against the dread closing in around them. Where are we going? Jake panted, a faint tremor in his voice slicing through the chaos. Just keep moving, the woman urged, glancing back over her shoulder. They're right behind you. The growl echoed again, low and predatory, sending a shiver down Sarah's spine. The shadows writhed as if alive, a swirling mass of malevolence eager to consume them. She dared not look back, afraid of what she might see, but the rumbling voice continued its relentless taunt. You cannot outrun the inevitable, it whispered, sliding through the air like oil over skin, coaxing and curling around Sarah's throat. The woman skidded to a halt in front of an old wooden door, its surface splintered and darkened. In here, quickly, she urged, panic palpable in her voice. They rushed forward, the sound of their feet against the rough floor punctuated by the growling that was now a full symphony of terror. Sarah pushed the door open, and it creaked ominously as they entered a narrow corridor lit by flickering lights. Stale air hit them like a cold slap, thick and suffocating. Where are we? Jake asked, his wide eyes darting around. We're in the old part of the house, the woman said, her voice lowering. It used to be a place of refuge, but she forced a shaky breath. Now, it's just as dangerous. Sarah felt a chill crawling up her spine. What do you mean by dangerous? They're not just following you. They're looking for something specific. This house, it has dark histories. Like what? Jake said, his curiosity momentarily overriding his fear. The woman hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. Years ago, a family lived here. They practiced unholy rites. They didn't believe the sacrifices would haunt them. But they did. Her voice trailed off, and dread sank deeper like a stone in Sarah's gut. Suddenly, a crash echoed from behind them. The door they had just entered slammed shut with a bone-rattling thud, barely open long enough for them to get inside. Heart pounding, Sarah lunged for the doorknob and twisted, but it wouldn't budge. They were trapped. We have to go? The woman urged, panic flashing across her face. This way. They moved further along the corridor. The flickering lights blurred the edges of reality, distorting their surroundings into grotesque shapes. Each step felt like treading deeper into a nightmare they might never escape. And the whispers grew louder, turning into a cacophony of voices, some pleading, others mocking. "Dear God, they want us," Jake whispered, his eyes wide with fear as they entered a dimly lit room. It was filled with strange symbols painted on the walls, and in the center lay an altar covered with dark stains, remnants of a past that should have remained buried. "Stop!" The woman spun around, her eyes wide with fear. "We can't linger here." Before she could finish her sentence, a rush of darkness seeped into the room, swirling like a violent wind. Shadows elongated, twisting into shattered whispers that seized at their throats. "They're here," the woman shouted, her voice trembling. "Things you can't even imagine. You must hold your breath." Just then, shadows broke into the room, dark figures slinking forward, more solid than Sarah had ever hoped. Fear gripped her like icy tendrils, squeezing the breath from her lungs. With no time to think, something primal kicked in. Sarah grabbed Jake's arm, the bond of their fear igniting a desperate drive. "We have to fight," she shouted, though deep down, she knew it was futile. "Run, now!" the woman screamed, and just like that, they were propelled forward, becoming a blur in the haze of terror, weaving through the impending doom that laid in watch. But as they dashed towards another door at the end of the room, questions flooded Sarah's mind. What were these creatures? What did they want? And why were they after them? As they lunged through the door, it slammed shut behind them, sealing their fate. But just as Sarah turned back, ready to confront the unknowable terrors, the low growl returned, this time different, more potent, as though the darkness spoke a twisted truth, promising them an ending they could neither predict nor escape. What awaited them in this new room? And were they truly safe from the shadows that whispered their names? They had only begun to uncover the depravity woven into this house. The real horrors were just around the corner, lingering like a wicked laugh in the silence. They stumbled into the new room, breathless and wide-eyed, the air thick with dread. The door behind them groaned as if protesting their presence, the shadows still clawing at its edges. Where are we now?" Jake shouted, his voice strangled with fear. "Stay close," the woman urged, her eyes darting around. "This room is even worse." In the dim light, Sarah saw walls lined with mirrors. Each shard reflected twisted versions of themselves, distorting their expressions of terror into grotesque masks. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them, an oppressive storm of haunting echoes. "They feed on fear," the woman explained, her face pale. "The mirrors trap the souls of those who fail to escape. If we don't find a way out." "Shut up." Jake cut her off, his voice cracking. "We need to think." But all Sarah could think about was the swarm of shadows just outside the door. She could feel their presence, heavy and palpable, an insistent pull toward the darkness that clawed at her sanity. "Look," Jake shouted, pointing to an ornate mirror at the far end of the room. It seemed to pulse with a light of its own, drawing them closer like moths to a flame. The whispers changed, transforming into something resembling words, their chilling familiarity setting her nerves on fire. "Come to us, join us now," Sarah shouted, shaking her head as if to dislodge the insidious lure. "That's what they want." Still, Jake moved forward, captivated. The look on his face was one of serenity, an eerie calm in the storm. "Sarah, it's beautiful." The woman lunged forward, grabbing Jake's arm. "Don't look at it. Don't you dare." But her grip was slipping as the mirror shimmered hypnotically, a silver sheen that danced like a beckoning hand. For a brief moment, Sarah felt herself drawn to it too, a whispering promise hiding behind the surface. A life where fear didn't have to exist. "No," she cried out, wrestling with the urge to approach. "We need to leave. We have to escape." Suddenly, a terrifying crack shattered the air, like thunder splitting the sky. The mirror warped, the glass bending as dark forms began to slither out. Faces emerged distorted and twisted in agony, mouths open in silent screams. "Run!" the woman screamed again, breaking the hypnotic spell lingering over them. They spun around, heart pounding, and bolted toward the door they had entered, but it was already too late. The shadows flowed across the floor like a river, blocking their escape, swirling around their ankles like icy fingers tugging them down. "No, no!" Jake panicked, his eyes wild. "Help me!" he cried as he stumbled back, the weight of the shadows pulling him closer to the terrible fate hidden in the mirrors. "Grab him!" the woman yelled as she reached out. Sarah launched herself toward Jake, desperately grasping his arm as he fought against the encroaching darkness. You have to fight. You can't give in. The shadows tightened their grip, drawing them all toward that cursed mirror. The air grew cold as if the very world around them was squashing against their bodies, suffocating. With every ounce of strength, Sarah pulled against the darkness, feeling the weight of souls pressing against her heart. Don't stop. Keep fighting, she urged, her determination igniting a flicker of hope. But hope felt so small against the vast terror threatening to consume them. Jake's breath was hitching, and for a terrifying moment, it felt like they might lose him. The shadows wrestled for control, their tortured voices blending into screams that echoed around her. Finally, with a wild jerk, Sarah screamed now, as she yanked Jake towards the door. Together, they broke free, crashing through the doorway just as the shadows lunged forward, hungry for their escape. They landed in an adjoining room, panting and gasping. The door slammed shut behind them, but the whispers had not faded. They remained, lingering just beyond the threshold, waiting for the moment they would slip back into that nightmare. Is everyone okay? The woman asked, her voice trembling. Jake was pale and shaken, but he nodded. Sarah took a deep breath. Still trembling. What is next? The woman's expression turned grave. This isn't over. They'll come for us again. We must find a way to end this or face the darkness forever. But before they could plan their next move, the shadows began to pulse again in the darkness, and Sarah felt an oppressive weight. Something worse was coming. What were they preparing for? What other horrors awaited them in this cursed house? The room they found themselves in was wider, but just as unsettling. Stone walls seemed to ooze moisture, dripping with a dark fluid that pooled on the ground. It felt like the very building was alive, its breath slow and putrid. The echoes of their gasps reverberated inside, mixing with the distant murmur of cries that came from nowhere, yet everywhere. Do you hear it? The woman whispered, her eyes darting to every corner of the room. The walls, they're alive. Jake shivered, holding tighter to Sarah's arm as if it could save him from losing himself. What now? Where do we go? He asked, his voice barely a rasp. Keep moving, the woman urged, leading the way. It felt wrong. Walking deeper was like walking into an abyss. The feeling of being watched crawled across Sarah's skin, every hair standing on end. Suddenly, the whispers turned more distinct, dark chant-like phrases echoing from the damp stone. Each word felt like a caress of ice on her spine. They're calling for us, Sarah murmured, resisting the urge to listen closer. It's the shadows, they want us. They want to trap us, the woman warned, rushing her pace. Don't let them infect your mind. But that message faded as they heard a loud thud behind them, the sound of the door slamming shut. Panic surged through Sarah's chest. We're trapped, she shouted, turning back. The door stood sealed, but not just by wood. It shimmered, dark energy swirling like smoke around its edges. It was clear they wouldn't be able to leave that way. Over there, Jake pointed to a shadowy archway that branched off to the left. Its darkness felt like a void, absorbing light. Are you crazy? Sarah gasped. We can't go deeper into this place. We have no choice. The woman insisted, her voice a harsh whisper. It's our only chance. Every instinct screamed against it as they moved toward the archway. The stench of bile and decay intensified, infecting their lungs. As they crossed the threshold, the whispers crescendoed in a chaotic melody of fury and despair, drowning out their thoughts. Quick, the woman urged, pulling them forward. The walls tightened as they entered. Sarah felt like she was being squeezed by the dark. Her vision narrowed to the flickering edge of desperation. But just as they crossed the threshold, the ground shook violently beneath them. The chilling sounds transformed into screaming actual screams, raw and pleading. They weren't alone. Figures emerged from the shadows, shapes twisted and distorted, blurring reality. Faces lined with grief and terror rushed towards them, captivated by what lay beyond. No, Sarah shouted, more to herself than to the others. We've got to push through. They stumbled forward, the raw energy of the storm closing around them. Stay together, the woman yelled, but the cries erupted like flames of fear igniting in every direction. Shadows lunged, clawing at their heels, trying to drag them into the depths of despair. Run! Jake's voice broke through as he dashed to the center of the room, trying to shield them. But as he moved, one of the figures lunged forward, its shadow-clawed hand reaching for him. A wild fear pulsed in the air. "Help him!" the woman cried, but Sarah felt paralyzed. Jake's face contorted in horror, his mouth moving as if screaming, though no sound escaped. It felt surreal, as if they were watching a nightmare unfold before them. "No, I won't let this happen," Sarah screamed, tearing herself from her stupor. She reached for Jake, but shadows enveloped him, twisting their claws tight around his body. "Hold on to me." A moment of contact between hands sparked an overwhelming force. "Don't let go," Sarah roared, feeling the energy surge through her arm as she yanked with all her might. But the shadows retaliated, darkness swirling around her like a malevolent tempest. "Fight it!" the woman shouted, fingernails digging into Sarah's arm to anchor her back to reality. In that heartbeat, when all hope seemed lost, an idea flickered. "The mirror," she cried out. "We need to face it." The light Jake's eyes widened, panic replaced by fierce determination. "The one from before. We have to break its hold." They rushed toward the mirrored surface lining the wall, shadows snapping at their heels. But the darkness swarmed thicker, battling them with the heart of despair and terror that lay unleashed. "Remember the weight of fear," the woman yelled, thrusting Sarah toward the mirror. As they approached, Sarah felt her fear manifest, a tangible entity clawing at her mind. But she pushed back, wrestling against the shadow's clutch. "No, I am more than this." The mirror pulsed, alive with the energy of their trailing chaos. It beckoned, glimmering with a brilliance deep within. As the shadows clawed at them, the figures closed in, and time felt like it stretched infinitely. What would happen if they jumped through? Would they be swallowed whole or liberated from the darkness? A choice loomed, the conclusion of their fate hanging silently in the balance, and the shadows pressed ever closer. Could they truly confront their own fears and destroy what haunted them? Or would they remain ensnared forever, locked in this horrific nightmare? The mirror shimmered with unholy allure, pulsating with something alive. Sarah felt its tug, a desperate call towards liberation or destruction. Shadows clawed at her ankles, pulling her back, their whispers now a cacophony of madness. Her heart hammered like a wild beast, the fear enveloping her like a thick fog. "Jump!" the woman screamed, her voice barely piercing the overwhelming din. Jake's expression vacillated between hope and terror. The mirror promised escape, but a price lurked just beneath its surface. The horrors of reality mercilessly awaited them if they failed. With a sudden surge of power, Sarah wrenched Jake closer, locking eyes with him. "Together," she cried. Time stretched, each second an eternity, until she felt a fierce resolve burning within her. They had to take the leap. "Now," she shouted. They lunged forward, bodies colliding with the shimmering glass. A physical jolt of energy shot through her, but instead of shattering, the mirror rippled like water, swallowing them whole. The world spun, colors blending into a savage whirlpool. Screams faded into silence, only to be replaced by oppressive darkness, heavy and thick, pressing against their bodies. Then, as if coaxed from a slumber, light broke through the void. Flickering shadows danced just beyond, their shapes realized in flashes, a nightmare renting the fabric of simplicity, yet also a voice of clarity. "Where are we?" Jake spat, shaking his head as he tried to comprehend the strange landscape before them. It was a vast expanse, a nightmarish blend of familiar and grotesque. Twisted trees jutted from a gnarled ground of ash and stone, their limbs grasping like skeletal fingers. "Look!" the woman cried, pointing to a distant glow. There, rising from the darkness, a fractured monolith towered, its surface pulsating with crude light, drawing them towards it like moths to a flame. But as they began to move, the ground rippled again, shifting as it undulated beneath them. The air thickened, suffused with a stench that clawed at their throats, pungent, earthy, and rotten. "Keep going," Sarah urged, her pulse racing, each step growing heavier in the sludge. Behind them, the mirror flickered ominously, shadows crawling back along its surface, whispering curses, hungry and waiting. Their escape had not severed them from that realm, it had tethered them to it eternally. Suddenly, a shadow broke from the depths, a figure emerged into the haze. It was a reflection of Jake, warped and sorrowful, mouth twisted into a scream. "Don't listen," The woman warned, yet the figure's voice cut through reason. You can't escape your pain. You can't escape me, it crooned, stretching its gaunt hand toward them. No, Jake shouted, backing away, but it was too late. The shadow lunged, fingers outstretched, merging with Jake's body, forming an insidious bond. Sarah gasped. Jake! She screamed. Desperation flooded her, fueling her instinct to act. She scrambled towards him, grasping at the spectral form's hand. Fight! She roared, recalling the urgency of the moment. Jake's features contorted, terror indistinguishable from rage. Get out of my head! He yelled, clutching his temples. The shadow grinned, dark pleasure illuminating its cold eyes. Don't let it in. The woman shouted, scrambling to the side as she grasped a jagged rock from the ground, swinging it with all her might. She struck the shadow, sending sparks of cold light cascading around them. In that moment, the darkness shivered, recoiling. But spirited echoes of torment grew louder, enveloped in the cacophony of wails that surged from every corner of the demon-lit realm. As Jake lashed out, clawing his own shadow, Sarah felt the skin on her arm begin to chill, inexplicably pulled in two directions. The struggle became unbearable, the shadows swirling around them like a storm of regret and despair. Fight it! We are stronger together, the woman yelled, but Sarah felt herself wavering, the weight of her own fears threatening to drown her as figures emerged around them, each a memory, an embodiment of something lost, each whispering sweetly of surrender. The forces demeaned them and rose higher, filling her lungs, threatened to turn the light they sought into darkness, flickering like a dying star. With one last scream, Sarah lunged towards Jake, reaching out, desperately seeking to pull him back before it was too late. She felt the cold grip of dread begin to slip, but what if something worse awaited them? As Sarah's grip tightened around Jake, she could feel time stretching, the world distorting, leaving them deceived at the precipice of endless night. And then, without warning, the ground trembled violently again as the shadows roared, their cries swelling. What lay beneath them, in that petrifying darkness? Would they sink into the void, or would they break free from the nightmare consuming them whole? The ground quaked, and the pull of the shadow realm grew stronger still. Would they be lost forever, or were they destined to confront an even greater evil lurking just out of view? The ground shook beneath their feet, sending Sarah and Jake reeling, grappling with the shadows threatening to swallow them whole. Dark whispers clawed at their ears, feeding off their growing despair, but Sarah gritted her teeth, holding tighter to Jake's hand. We can't let them win, she shouted over the chaos. The distorted figure of Jake's shadow snarled, teeth glinting in the dim light. You don't belong here, it hissed, each syllable sending chills crawling up Sarah's spine. Give in, and you will be free. No, Sarah cried, desperation igniting her spirit. We're stronger than this. The woman, barely standing against the oppressive force of darkness, surged ahead, determination written across her face. Together, we need to confront it as one. Heart pounding, Sarah steeled herself. What about the monolith? She panted, pointing toward the fractured structure glowing faintly in the distance. It might be our only hope. Yes, the woman agreed, her voice ringing with urgency, her resolve unbroken. It could hold the key to breaking this nightmare. We have to go? Jake echoed, his voice now threaded with both fear and hope. The darkness quivered again, inching closer, surrounding them like a thick fog. Shadows snaked toward their ankles, dragging along the ground, trying to pull them back into despair. With every ounce of strength, they fought through the murky grips of their fears, pushing towards the pulsing light of the monolith. Stay together, Sarah urged, her heart racing, fear propelling them forward. The path felt endless, the shadows swirling like a tempest, clawing for their heels, desperate to pull them under. Sarah thought of her home, Jake's innocent laughter, the fleeting sense of safety she had once had. A fierce desire to protect all they had defined their years surged through her as they neared the monolith. Its light flickered ominously despite its inviting glow. What do we do when we get there? Jake asked, glancing over his shoulder as despair clawed, threatening to drag him back. We must face it, the woman said gravely. It is a reflection of our deepest fears, and only by confronting them can we find freedom. Together, Sarah affirmed, pulling Jake closer. We can do this. At last, the trio reached the shimmering surface of the monolith, radiating an ethereal glow. Shadows writhed just beyond its reach, a malevolent presence promising torment. What do we do? Jake whispered, panic evident. The woman stepped forward, her eyes reflecting both fear and hope. We must each express our fears, acknowledge them. Only then can we shatter the hold they have over us. Sarah's throat tightened. What if we can't? What if they consume us? Then we must remember who we truly are, the woman replied, shaking with urgency yet firm. The light represents our hope. We can beat the darkness together. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped to the front. I fear losing you, Jake, she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. I fear that this darkness will swallow us whole, taking everything we love. As her words echoed, the shadows surged, a roar of anguish reverberating through the air, but she stood firm. She wouldn't back down. Jake stepped forward next, his eyes alight with fear, but edged with bravery. I fear being alone, Mom. I fear never getting back home. But I don't want to end up lost in this dark forever. A spark ignited in the air, brief but undeniable. Finally, the woman stepped up. Her voice trembled but resonated with strength. I fear the past, what I did and what I've become. But I am ready to rewrite my story. At that moment, the shadows screamed and writhed in pain, retreating slightly at the sound of their unified truths. Sarah felt a flicker of warmth invade the cold press of the night. Let us join hands. In a tight circle, the three linked their arms, grounding one another in the moment. Together, she shouted, feeling the pulse of determination coursing through their connection. Together, they repeated, their voices harmonizing like a battle cry. Then they turned to face the monolith head-on, casting the cry of their deepest fears upward. As they shouted, the light of the monolith exploded outward, streaming like a beacon through the dark, dispelling shadows as it spread. The swirling shadows shrieked, retreating violently, their whispers quickly morphing into sounds of agony. The wave of light tore through the dark like a jagged knife, searing the curls of dread surrounding them. The shadows struggled to cling onto them, but with every word, Sarah felt a weight lifting, a sense of freedom flooding her senses. I choose love, she shouted. I choose hope. Jake yelled again. I choose redemption. The woman cried, conviction ringing clear through it all. The monolith exploded into 1,000 shards of light, driving into the darkness that rattled desperately at the edges of their reality. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. Let it go? She screamed, feeling power coursing through her veins. Jake, too, raised his voice in defiance. You don't own us. We belong to the light. As the final echoes of their crescendo blasted forth, the shadows screamed one last time before dissolving into nothingness, dissipating into everything they feared most. The world spun, the grip of darkness loosening, revealing a shimmering expanse that felt almost breathable. Breathless, Sarah blinked against the resplendent light. Did we do it? Jake stared wide-eyed, the corners of his lips curling upward as the terror that had clutched them finally waned. I think so. The woman smiled, relief breaking across her face. You did it. You faced the darkness together and came out stronger. Before them lay a path, radiant and inviting, leading away from the shadows, towards warmth and light. She turned to Sarah and Jake, emotion flooding her chest. Now go, live without fear. They stepped forward together, leaving behind the remnants of their nightmarish endeavor. The weight of fear lifted. They turned back one last time, watching as the shadows crumbled into the ether, bound by neither time nor fear. And as they vanished, the weight of the world fell off their shoulders, lightness enveloping them like a warm embrace. Together, Sarah whispered, taking Jake's hand, never willing to let him go again. And together, they walked through the light, tethered by love, never to look back at the nightmare that once held them captive. But as they strolled further into the daylight, an understanding loomed beneath the surface. Darkness would always hover at the periphery, waiting for a moment of weakness. But they had the power to face it together, time and time again. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss out on more exclusive stories just like this one. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help others discover this tale. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Let's hear what you think. And Don T, wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support means everything.